before I begin, also shout out to the students here. We do shout outs at Abnormal. And the one thing I do like to see is when students come in as just an inclusive environment. We were all noobs at one point, and it's important to cultivate this community and bring these students along as well. My name is Chris Haley. I lead our sales engineering team at Abnormal Security, and I'm a Camp Lejeune water drinker, believe it or not. I'm okay though. You guys have all seen those commercials. Today what we're going to talk about are 3 ways that cyber criminals are targeting your email. And before I begin on that, as I was kind of going through the interview cycles of looking at Abnormal, my initial thought was, email really? Like, hasn't that already been fixed? Hasn't that been solved already? Like, we're talking about this application, this communication tool that nobody really likes. Like who really enjoys email besides, a handful out there. So the more I learned about it, though, the more I realized how big this attack surface actually is, despite the trial and error and all the attempts over the years to combat these threat actors that are trying to use this as a way to get in. So I also have an alarm set on my phone. When that alarm goes off, it's by design because I have 2 teenage sons at home right now. And if anybody happens to have roofies in their car, just come find me afterwards. There may be a Bengal tiger in my house if I don't get home in time. So that's the purpose of the alarm. But let's talk about the old and the new a little bit. The old was on-prem exchange, emails that would reside on a server within your data center. MX records would go through your own physical 4 walls. There was a day like that, students. There was a day when things didn't exist in the cloud, just to be clear. And we all managed that stuff. Like, we would go in and do the rack and stack and everything would come in. It was a bit of like a moat and mortar type of design and architecture, right? We would physically safeguard things. There would be access control and the IT change control and all of that really created these limited points of entry within the network. That's all changed, right? The moment, I don't even know what the first SaaS or cloud app is. Anybody in the room know what it is? That's actually a good trivia question, but that day that ship has sailed. And the moment that everybody started trusting this idea of putting data out into the cloud, then it became easier. Well, let's take our communications and move it out of our data center and let's put it into the cloud. Let's do so through unmanaged devices. Who remembers BYOD or this whole notion of a network without borders, this whole concept of we got to connect all the devices, right? Everybody in this room is like, what are we doing, right? We all remember those, but that's consequently where we're at. Not to mention too, there's been a demand on how can I use my OAuth credentials and hit all my SaaS apps, and not have to manage all this stuff. So here we are. We're at a place where email resides within the cloud along with hundreds of other SaaS applications. And you guys get to listen to all the vendors solve all the problems with all the buzzwords. And yet here we are, right? We're still tackling this problem. The reason why email is such a big attack vector is this. Number one, it's exceptionally cheap, right? There's really very little cost or investment to use email as an attack source. The second thing is access. It's critical mass. Like, we all have 7 email addresses. There are so many ways to get in touch with people via email. Even though it's annoying, even though it's not our favorite way to communicate, it's still there. So when you think about that, every threat actor virtually has access to any target they want via this communication medium. And like within our own company, we're developing technology to start extending into collaboration tools like Slack and Teams and the like. And then I kind of remind myself and I remind like my team and prospects and this and that, yes, that is an attack surface, but how big is it really, right? There's a number of things that need to happen in order for an attack to execute using Slack or Microsoft Teams and so forth. Whereas email is virtually unfettered. It's Wild West, open to everybody. You can get access to everybody. It's cheap, I already mentioned that, and it doesn't require a ton of training, right? So if you think about those 3 things, it's available, I have access to, virtually anyone I want to get access to, and I don't need to be trained on it. Why is it still the number one attack vector? It's those three reasons. It's virtually, we can train people. And if you think of the other side of the adversaries, that's what they do. They're going to teach people how to write the scripts, how to register, 100 Gmail accounts and, dynamically change them all and run through the same campaigns. And then they're going to get measured on the effectiveness. Rinse and repeat, and then they may get promoted into a higher end, function. But as it stands, this is still the number one attack vector. And it's important to use new techniques to safeguard against new attacks, right? So what's always worked when things were on-prem, we're going to say, hey, we know everything there is to know and write a human-derived policy. We've solved it all. And I'm not implying that anybody in this room has that logic when they do that. We all know that there's eventual problems, but therein lies the issue with the human bias. Any Splunk administrators in the room, any SIM people within the SOC, and I'll assume that there's at least one in here. That also has a human level bias, right? I think I know what the threat actor is going to do, therefore present this material to me on this dashboard. That's kind of the logic. And then when the moment we kind of get over that logic, where we think we're going to cover all the bases and we can, put the 80% up there and open our mind up to the fact that there's probably some weird shit out there happening that we don't even know about. And there's techniques that we're not even considering. There's attack victims within the four walls of my own organization that I'm not even considering them as a high risk target. And once we start kind of getting out of the mindset of, blocking, stopping, old school and everything else, and evaluating what are the other guys trying to do? What's the playbook they're trying to run? And how do I defend against it? That's where we need to start thinking. And so when we look at why business email compromise is a problem, I know we could come up with 90, 100 reasons and put them all on a whiteboard. This fundamentally comes down to a couple different things. The first of which, we, and I say this, we collectively in this room, we tend to fall in love with these ideas of these sophisticated, elaborate, Ocean's 11 types of attacks, that are highly coordinated, get through a system, cover down the tracks, and then just start laterally moving and then exfiltrating data. And then all of a sudden you have 4 million bank records or patient health records that, now wind up on the Wall Street Journal. Those are the ones that make the news. And those are the ones that, are really elaborate. And those are where, the SaaS vendor sales tend to draft off of, right? What about the ones that never make the news because they're too embarrassing, right? I'm going to show a slide here in a moment on what the FBI has quantified business email compromise. It's much greater than that number. Here's where we're at though. The vendor community and the solutions out there focus on technical threats. Business email compromise is a low-tech attack. It is low-tech. It is social engineering. It is not something where you need the sophistication of what's happening on the wire. You do, but it's also highly socially engineered. The second thing is because, as I mentioned before, the risk reward. Think of the first example, how many logs and fingerprints one would have to clean up in order to successfully execute one of these high-touch attacks that breaches a number of systems, laterally moved, and so on and so forth. I mean, there's people in this room that can do it, I get that. It's very difficult though. It's not easy to leave all stones unturned and walk out clean. Email, you can do that. You can get in and out, you can anonymize yourself. You don't have to, we all know that there's ways to anonymize sessions and everything else, but email can be highly anonymous. You can be anybody you want to be. You can impersonate anyone you want to impersonate. That's the beauty behind it. That's why it's still widely used. But when we look at BEC and you look at the return on time invested and you look at the time and material, you look at the labor, it is such a profitable way to extract dollars or pesos or euros or whatever the medium, the currency of choice is. The return on investment is huge with BEC. I've seen a three email exchange result in a $4 million invoice payment. It's ridiculous. And then social engineering. Does everybody kind of believe in this, that humans are innately helpful I mean, there's some in this room that aren't. You know who you are. But for all intents and purposes, people try to be helpful, right? They say yes. They want to please people. They want to say yes. I'm going to be helpful. That dude's awesome. He's a rock star. He's fast. He gets stuff done. That's what people want. They want this trust and this idea that, hey, this is a go-to. He's going to get things done. She's going to get things done. Social engineering is highly effective. Highly effective. That's why business email compromise is a problem. It returns. It's a high yield type of attack, and they're pretty simple to execute. This is the aforementioned slide that I was talking about before. The FBI will estimate, the FBI has been tracking this for about 10 years. 2013 is when this started becoming a thing within the FBI, when BEC started to surface, when companies were going, you know what, I got scammed on email. There wasn't even a name for it. They would call it a scam. Somebody came in and impersonated me or impersonated this vendor, and I paid them and I can't get the money back. What can you do? Well, I can't do anything. That money's gone, right? How many people have cyber insurance, those that work at like an internal company, or just blink once if you have it? Here's a did you know. Did you know that BEC is not covered under most cyber insurance premiums? Like go try to negotiate that.
Yeah, human error is not covered. Technical errors are covered.
Technical errors are covered, human error is not. BEC, social engineering, falls into which bucket? Human error, right? So BEC attacks, and everybody that's sitting at the board meeting, rubbing their belly, thinking that they're secure and everything else, you're going to be surprised if this ever happens to your organization that there's a $3 million invoice that goes out the door. Okay, what's our premium? What do we have to pay? Sorry, we got some bad news for you. Remember this part that you kind of skipped over, technical versus human error? Sorry, and so this is where there's this illusion of cyber insurance. BEC is still a big problem, right? And the technical controls to solve for these socially engineered attacks is very, very difficult. This is continuing to grow. And I think part of it too is that when you start to see success and you start to see the yields from these attacks, and these threat actors are going, okay, this worked, this didn't, let's, trial and error. It's a whole ecosystem. We all know that. One thing that I'm seeing, I'm working on this project right now related to BEC, but it's a very specific one. It's around grant funding. $1.3 trillion were issued last year in 2022, with our taxpayer dollars on grants to a range of different organizations, non-for-profits, Department of Education, Department of Transportation. There's a ton of dollars that go out there. It is also required, the level of transparency around grants is immense, right? So how much is the award? When does it need to be spent by? Who won the award? What are they spending it on? What are all the public meeting notes that are available? That is a treasure trove for threat actors. And so they can weaponize these attacks using all your public data that by federal law should be public and available to the public with a single click. There are no controls. So that's why when we look at the skyrocketing nature of it, we're kind of fighting ourselves with the policies, the federal laws that are out there that require transparency, at least on the grant side. On the private sector, this is where the number's a little bit lower because people don't disclose them because they're highly embarrassed and it might be a brand or a reputation type of thing. But this is going to continue to climb. Grants are a new untapped source for threat actor types of attacks because of the public nature of the data available. So when you get into social engineering and the grant should be awarded to this party, it needs to be spent at this time for this purpose, there's a treasure trove of information. So that, again, this is not a surprise, but there's, that's some additional context. So it keeps getting worse. That's me, I don't read emails. But yeah, it's getting, it's not, is it getting worse? Our data suggests it is a little bit. Increasingly sophisticated inbound attacks. So let's just talk a little bit about this. I saw one yesterday, and I know I've seen some of these attacks recently. They're not necessarily a total shock or a surprise. I actually went through an exercise of sandboxing a specific attack. And I've seen this one a few dozen times, but I went through this exercise of, it was one of those Facebook violation messages. You've violated Facebook, you're in jail, click on this link to file an appeal. So you click on the link, it goes into a Facebook Messenger thing into your browser, continue as your name or continue as whoever is cached and logged in, and it directly opens up a Facebook Messenger session to Meta support. I'm like, oh, interesting. Let's look at the profile. No followers, no likes. It was strictly an impersonation. But the goal was, how can I get this user out of the four walls of their email into an unfettered channel that has no visibility using impersonation? I mean, for all intents and purposes, nobody knows what that strategy was. Was it social engineering, or am I going to send you a credential phishing? The thing is these tools are all widely being used today, especially when we look to the far right and we look at who our adversaries are. Many of them are not English as first language. So their grammar, like everybody's read those Nigerian prince emails over the years, and they read like, there's a meme going around, my dad writes like a Nigerian prince. But these are all like widely used. LinkedIn is another treasure trove of public information that is widely used for impersonation. Has anybody tried to write an email with ChatGPT for a malicious purpose? Like, write me a Nigerian prince email. They used to have that in the beginning. There's some controls in place now that prevent some of the nefarious uses. But it would spit out one of these things. Good day, I am writing to you from such and such, and I have $10 million that I inherited, the whole shtick. ChatGPT is widely used. We see that all the time in some of these, and in fact, it's a productivity tool for our adversaries, just like we use it for the things that we use it for. So there's sophistication just with the availability of these tools that are going into the weaponization of some of these emails. Here's an example. Show of hands, who knows what an aging report is? A handful, okay? This is not a technical attack. This is a finance attack. An aging report is basically what it is a report that shows outstanding invoices and balances due from your customers. So what the purpose behind this one is, it's an impersonation attack typically coming from a finance director, C-level, CFO type of thing. Send me the latest aging report for this period. It'll show all the customers, all the invoice numbers, all the outstanding dues, down in spreadsheet fashion. This is a common business practice, aging reports. Threat actors are now weaponizing these because this is the tip of the spear of the attack on a business email compromise, on a vendor fraud, or on a invoice fraud type of attack where you're trying to siphon money. It's the intelligence collected within the aging report that becomes useful. An invoice number, a due date, terms, the dollar amount, the contacts, it's all right there. And so as you craft that message and you use some of those tools, hey, ChatGPT, write me an email asking a customer to pay this invoice for this amount for blah, blah, blah. Boom, write it out. Now all of a sudden, this threat actor is going to impersonate the company and target that customer. Hey, when is this invoice being paid? This is overdue. Oh, we'll get it out by Friday. Oh, by the way, we're switching banks. And here's our ACH banking details. Are there any forms we need to fill out before Friday? So the aging report is the tip of the spear. The fact that it's in Italian is a different wrinkle, right? So you think of the multinational aspects of global business, right? There could be a subsidiary that resides that's in Italy that indirectly, this is who the threat actor is going after. It could be a side door. There could be less sophistication within that tenant, for example. So here's an example of an aging report. And I've seen the full stack execution of these attacks, to the aging report, to the impersonation, to the engagement from the internal person that is about to pay that bill. Second one. What did I do wrong here? Okay, second one here. Character substitution or hidden characters, right? So when we look at this one, the direct, I'm changing my direct deposit before the next payroll. Can you guys fix that for me? I mean, that is the laziest attack in the world. Now, here's what we'll see though. When we look at direct deposit, a lot of ways that folks try to solve for this problem are dictionary-based rules, transport rules, take these keywords, phrases, terms, etc., and do something with it, whatever that happens to be, right? Don't deliver the message to my users. What the other guys are going to do is stuff like this. They're going to insert weird characters. They're going to insert hidden characters to basically carve up the actual word to evade some of those controls. So that's another example. Multi-step phishing campaigns to OneDrive, right? So when we look at technology that looks at URLs, hey, maybe we'll rewrite these because we don't even know where they're going and we've never seen them before. When you start looking at, CAPTCHA types of examples, click on the 4 signs, click on a motorcycle, click on the trees to advance. So they're all using these tools and techniques, to present this level of legitimacy, right? Credential phishing, and I'm talking BEC. Let me just plug this briefly. There are so many layers to phishing and techniques, QR codes, you guys have seen those. Anybody ever heard of caffeine or evil proxy? Any of those? Yeah. So those are the ones that are a nuisance these days, these phishing as a service that are doing MFA, credential harvesting, or stealing tokens, this and that and the other. The point being is that these threat actors, it's cat and mouse, they're evolving, right? They're trying to evade existing controls, right? So when we think of the strategy over email, it's number one, what's my objective? What am I going after? What's the goal of the attack? The public and the media will say ransomware, right? Every attack's ransomware, it's going to encrypt a file. But, again, it's do I want the aging report? Do I want the actual invoices? That could be the goal. That could be good enough. It could be changing a banking record. It could be clicking on a link and giving up creds, right? So when we look at the sophistication behind some of these tools, again, this is why email is still a really, really big deal, is we see modern attacks that are landing despite the existing investments, despite the hundreds of hours spent in security awareness training, despite all the full stack that we bought, despite the overlapping tools, right? I have Microsoft, I have Defender, I have ATP, I have all this stuff, and this shit still lands. Why? Why is it landing, right? It's these evolving attacks. So as we get into the second part around supply chain, right? This is the impersonation element. This is where when you look at third-party vendors and you look at business partners, there is no questionnaire in the world that will safeguard you against their lack of controls that they have in place. Especially, again, as we go back to it, email is virtually accessible from anyone to anyone. So when we get into these, when we look at this attack, and I've seen this one before, let me just quickly review and look at the salient details here, right? So there's this could be an extension. This is a little bit lazy because it lacks the specifics around an invoice and everything else. But what they're suggesting is please reconcile all unpaid orders to what your records show between us and any of the companies or subsidiaries. Send us a list of all open invoices. They're asking 3 things for you to do, right? Send us a list, disregard the banking details, and by the way, as a little incentive, we're going to give you a 5% discount if you can get this done by the end of the day. Sorry about the inconvenience. And then
I said, don't do it.
and then you look at it too, the reply to address changes, right? So now that this person receives the email, we can do all of this in any email client. We can do this within Gmail. We simply change this reply to address. It takes the attack from the 4 walls of this compromised account into one that the threat actor has sole access over, thus bypassing the controls on the compromised side. So we're looking at all these types of supply chain attacks. And again, as I mentioned before, those are hard to solve for. They're difficult. And most of the time, they don't involve a technical attack. It's social engineering. So again, how do we safeguard against those? Vendor hijack. We ever see these where an adversary's sitting there squatting on an account takeover, they look through sent items, and then boom, here's a discussion around an invoice, and all of a sudden they're active, right? Now all of a sudden a new domain pops up, a typo squat or a lookalike domain that is one character off. It was registered yesterday too, by the way, right? Those things, they're very new, and the paint's, very, very fresh. And so when we look at this, here's a lot of the other the social engineering. We're going to go through a fiscal audit. We're checking all this. We need this detail from you. And we're moving from checks to ACH. I just saw this one last week too. We had a check that was cut. It was from a company that was renting space from a landlord, and their monthly balance or their monthly payment was $52,000. And so the threat actor jumps in, same exact effect. Oh, I still got a minute. Same exact effect. They were squatting. They took over the thread. They were able to say, hey, change from check to ACH. The inside person changed from bank to ACH. Not to mention, too, it was an invoice that was due like 27 days ago, and the new invoice was due 3 days from now. So in effect, it was a $52,000 TAC times 2, so $104,000. They were ready to hit send, right? We were able to stop the bus.
Good job.
And then lastly, just all the extension of the SaaS applications, right? Your OAuth creds, I don't want to type and sign in. I just want to pass those along. All right. Where's my roofie guy? I'll be out there in a second. But just think of all the additional applications that are involved with, today's modern world as it relates to cloud and SaaS, and the extension of some of these, right? WhatsApp. Hey, can you give me your WhatsApp number? I'm in a meeting, but I have something important for you to do. Those are the favor emails. They're the real low level basic. Let's go hit a new hire, or you students as you guys get internships. If you see a big title, like actually click into the sender instead of just look at the name and say, what can I do for you, sir? It's like take that extra step of vigilance. Because, hey, if you're getting an email and you're an intern from a CEO, there's probably something wrong. Unless you're working at a super cool company, right? So when we look at how to stop modern attacks, right? We've talked about the range of inputs, we have inbound email. This is one of many ways in, but look at all this, right? We have insider threats. We have internal account takeovers. We have new points of entry with SaaS applications. There's a lot of ways in these days, right? When we look at supply chain compromise, we see, on average, an organization is going to get one of these per week. They're going to get one of these a week, so 52 a year. Of those 52, how many are successful? That's an interesting question to ask, because most people don't disclose when they do get breached. When it does happen, your insurance adjuster for that cyber company is going to tell you to piss off, right? Because it's a human error. And then we get into the SaaS app sprawl, right? So that brings me to, I'll if you guys want to hear more about Abnormal, anyone going to Black Hat, we're going to be there next week. I personally will be there as well. So if anybody's going to attend that was here this week, come by and say hello. I'm going to be in the morning booth sessions. So did I lose the slide? Okay, News Corp. Yeah. And the reason why I wanted to touch on this. So those that are used to spinning up enterprise apps within your tenant, within your Azure environment, right? Here's what happened. Threat actors spun up an enterprise app that basically took data and shipped it off, right, for 2 years. And what they're able to find is a high level of intelligence around articles that have yet to be published, right? It was a major, major breach. But when we think about, attack compromise through third-party app API, right? I'm going to deploy an enterprise app, and what can I get from it? I mean, back in when I was doing actual keys on or hands on keyboard, was always that rogue VM that was in the lab that never got patched, that was a target-rich environment, right? So now we look at the extension of that, it's the enterprise apps. Who's keeping an eyeball on those? What level of access do they have from a read-write perspective? So there's just a lot of different elements to that. The last thing I'll plug beyond Black Hat, and if you do go to Black Hat, do please stop by. I'd love to talk to you guys. My friend Faz over here, raise your hand. Also my colleague at Abnormal. If anybody's interested in hearing more about what we do and how we do it and interest level in the product, just come see us afterwards. I appreciate you guys letting me be here. This is a great chapter, a lot of numbers, and everything I'm told, this is a really good community. Hopefully you guys will invite me back again. Would love to spend some more time down here. Thank you very much.